question that Jason Giambi is the leader of this young A's ball club.
His teammates were chanting MVP, MVP at him.
The bottom of the 14th, walk-off, grand slam.
Down for another Giambi home run.
Number 400 for Giambi.
Giambi with a drive, deep right field. Are you kidding me?
Jason Giambi retiring this week. Outstanding career, .399 career on base, .516 career slugging. If you look at it with league adjusted and era adjusted, his OPS plus is right there with Duke Snider, Reggie Jackson, Norm Cash, Carlos Delgado, players like that. And yet a mixed legacy, of course, with performance enhancing drugs and his testimony to a grand jury. Joining us right now is Bryan Grosnick of Beyond the Box Score and SB Nation. I know, Bryan, you wrote a column on the Giambino being the most aughts player. Explain your reasoning there.
Well, when I think of the aughts, the 2000 to 2009 era, I got to think of two major things. The first is the steroid era and kind of the end of the PED era. And Giambi was named in that Balco conversation. He was obviously apologized for his PED usage in 2005. So he was a big part of that. But he was also a big part of the kind of the sabermetrics revolution. I mean, Moneyball was all about how Giambi had to be replaced by the Athletics, who didn't have the money to replace him. So he was both sides of parts of both of that conversation, which is kind of rare for a player in the 2000s.
And also his plate discipline, right? I mean, he led the league in walks twice in those outrageous offensive years that he had. So he kind of started, I don't know if he started that trend, but he was part of that trend, right? That guy who would just wait for his pitch, and if he didn't get a pitch to crush, he would take his base.
Yeah, he's basically what Joey Votto goes to bed at night hoping he'll wake up to be. The way he loved to walk, he had great plate discipline, a fantastic on-base percentage, like you mentioned before. I mean, he got on base about 2 out of every 5 times he was up, and then he hit for real power. I mean, he was a huge home run hitter in addition to that.
You know, Bryan, one thing like I haven't heard in the discussion is, and I think it should be discussed, and then people can rule it out all they want, but is he a Hall of Famer? Performance only. If you are a performance-only voter, where does he, cross on that line, either in the Hall of Fame or not quite the Hall of Fame?
So he's one of those guys who had a great peak. I mean, his 7-year peak was huge. His 3-year peak from 2000 to 2002, I mean, he was the best hitter in baseball not named Barry Bonds, which is really something even in the steroid era. But as a whole, his career, even though it's 20 years, even though he had so much success, he probably doesn't fit in just by performance in the Hall of Fame. There are a couple of guys who he outperformed that are in the Hall of Fame, guys like Orlando Cepeda, Tony Perez, but he didn't have the overall production beyond those critical years in Oakland and the beginning of his time in New York to really match up with some of the wins above replacement totals or the overall counting stats of a lot of the first basemen who are above him. Even some guys who are his contemporaries like Todd Helton, Jeff Bagwell, those type of guys managed to outperform him over career.
Yeah, he's not an all-around player, but what he did do, he did very, very well, especially at his peak. Bryan Grosnick, again, of Beyond the Box Score. Bryan, good talking to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Bryan.
All right, there's so much to jump on here, fellas. I mean, his years with the A's were outrageously good, and his years with the Yankees were not bad. You know, I think people look at it as a bust. In that Pedro Martinez game where Grady Little kept with Pedro Martinez, way too long, it was the Giambino who hit 2, I should just call him Jason Giambi. He hit 2 solo home runs off Pedro when Pedro was still fresh, leading to the possibility of a comeback. Had the Yankees not lost to the Marlins in the ensuing World Series, I think we remember the Yankee and Jason Giambi years very different.
This guy was a terrific player, and I think, unfortunately, the PEDs, when he came out and admitted to it, but I will say this, I think one of the telltale signs that you're talking about two opposite ends of the spectrum. Alex Rodriguez, right? But if you go around and you talk with guys that have played with or played against Jason Giambi, Bryan, you will never hear a former teammate or a guy that knows him say anything but glowing things about Jason Giambi. And when we do the 30 teams in 30 days, and 2 years ago, I walked up to Terry Francona, and he was so excited to have Jason Giambi back in camp with the Cleveland Indians because of the influence that he has and had on the younger players. And listen, he was really close to getting a manager's job with the Colorado Rockies 2 years ago in the offseason. I think he turned his life around, and I think more importantly, I think this was a guy at the end of a career that really appreciated the game of baseball more than he did at the beginning of his career.
You played with him.
Best hitter I ever played with, by far. I mean, it was
was a spectacle to watch. Again, I feel like a broken record, but I mentioned this before. There was a stat in like 2001 in which he was a 9-win player, by the way, according to WAR. That there was a runner on third base in less than 2 outs. 40 different times he came up in that situation in which he got the runner in. It was like 38 or 39 times out of 40. I mean, it's just
that's unbelievable.
That's a joke. Like league average is 50%. And you know, as a former player going up there, I don't know how you felt, Randy, but every time I came up, runner on third base less than 2 outs, it was like, man, I was gripping the sawdust out that bat, and those are tension-filled sort of moments. And here this guy was just an absolute machine.
Yeah, and you know, when you go up in that situation, like you said, you put a little bit too much pressure on yourself. But what Jason did, he relaxed. He said, you know what, I have the advantage here versus this pitcher. All I have to do is put the ball in play. And he did. And that's a testament to not only being a power hitter, but being a hitter.
Yep.
You know, he was able to cut down his swing, control his swing, put the barrel of the bat on the ball, and drive a guy in. And this guy, he was an offensive weapon. A lot of people think of him with New York when he was more of just a power hitter. But in Oakland, that's when I think of Giambi. I think of him in Oakland. He was an offensive weapon, average power production.
Interesting in the I keep saying the mixed legacy, but that's it. It's not like, oh, PED's part of that automatic villain. No, not an automatic villain, right? There's different phases of life and redemption and everything else. And Giambi kind of a beloved figure at this point as he retires. But the Hall of Fame discussion is not over just yet. Because he's not eliminated from the conversation is my point.
Absolutely.
Right? If other guys are performance only, well then he's in that conversation. I'm not saying I would vote. I'm saying it should be out there.